Chapter 34 of the Alps, the Danube, and the Near East. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Betty B. The New Woman in Turkey. The women of Turkey are coming out of their seclusion, going about with their faces uncovered, and learning to take a part in politics and business. When I was in Constantinople 15 years ago, the poorer women wore veils so thick that you could not see through them, and only the high-class ladies of the harems had white gauze veils showing above their balloon-like black dresses. Today, the majority of those on the street have their faces perfectly bare, and the veiled woman is the exception. The women still wear unsightly coverings over their heads, but these are drawn tight down around the sides of the face so that all the features show. Even a few years ago, the better-class Turkish girls wore veils when out driving, especially when going to such places as the sweet waters of Europe. Now they may be seen with uncovered faces, notwithstanding the many young men riding about in motor cars or on horseback. I see them often in the boats on the Golden Horn, their veils thrown back, and they do not hesitate to look at the men. In fact, they seem to want the men to notice them. Most of the women at functions of the higher classes are now without veils. At an official reception the other evening, more than 30 young girls appeared wearing décolleté gowns. This would have been impossible a few years ago. When during the World War the women went to the field and served as nurses, they began to take off their veils. Many of them joined the Red Crescent, which is the Turkish Society of the Red Cross. Others did all sorts of war and relief work, and like the nurses, discarded their face coverings. Since the war, the employment of girls has been largely extended, and unveiled women work in stores, operate typewriters, and run telephone switchboards. There is a dry goods establishment in Pera run entirely by women. Stamboul has a department store where there are many women clerks. They are dressed in black, but their faces are unveiled. There are unveiled women peddlers in the bazaars who called out to me as I passed to come in and buy. Unveiled girls of the higher class, with red ribbons across their breasts, stand on the corners asking alms for special charities. If you give, they will pin a protective tag on the lapel of your coat. Many of the Turkish women are going in for charitable work. Some run orphan asylums and hospitals. Women have recently been allowed to plead their own cases in the Turkish courts, and in some instances have been successful. It used to be that husband and wife never appeared together on the streets, and there was a law forbidding Turkish men and women to go to a public entertainment together, no matter if they were husband and wife, brother and sister, or mother and son. Today I saw a dozen men and women walking together across the bridge, leading from the European quarters to Stamboul, and some went arm in arm. Up to 6 years ago, there was a statute prohibiting a man and a woman from riding together in the same vehicle. Now both sexes are often to be seen in the same motor car. The streetcars still have compartments in front reserved for Turkish women. But there is a distinction between Mohammedans and Christians. A Turkish woman may walk with a Turkish man, but her going about with a Christian may cause trouble. The Mohammedan women are not only attending the movies, but some of the educated girls are acting for the screen. Several are making a success at posing in all sorts of costumes. As to public entertainments, the new Magic Theater has a special dispensation permitting a Turk to enter with his wife, but at most of the movies there is one section for the women and another for the men. The manager of one of the movies says he doesn't like the women to patronize his house, for if a woman comes alone she is stared at, and if she has a man with her, one of the old-fashioned Turks is likely to call the police. Constantinople has a weekly paper of large circulation, published by and for women. It is printed in the Arabic language, and among the illustrations are pictures of women advertising silk stockings and lingerie. The paper contains political activities, poetry, and fiction, and its chief aim is the advancement of women. I hear all sorts of talk about doing away with the harem and the establishment of monogamy as a national custom. Dr. Fuad Bey, formerly Minister of Health and Child Welfare, says that in a recent trip across Turkey, he did not find any man with more than one wife, and that the time will soon come when a law will be passed prohibiting plural marriage. However that may be, there are still harems all over Turkey, especially out in the country where the women do the work and are a labor asset to their husbands. The Koran permits a man to have 4 wives and as many female slaves as he can support. Among the higher classes, each wife has a separate establishment. The objections to polygamy are due not so much to conscientious scruples as to the additional expense in these days of the high cost of living, and to the inevitable disquiet in a household of several wives. When I was here the first time, many years ago, I learned much about the harem of Sultan Mahmud II. Upon his accession, in order to make his throne safe, he sewed up the 174 wives of Mustafa IV in sacks loaded with shot and dropped them into the cool waters of the Bosporus. Abdul Aziz, uncle of Abdul Hamid, was especially fond of blue-eyed beauties with golden hair. He had 1,200 slaves in his harem, and it is said that his expenses for presents and dresses were about $800,000 a year. Abdul Hamid had a big harem with scores of eunuchs to watch the women. His chief eunuch wore a uniform of scarlet and gold and built a mosque to serve as his tomb. The eunuchs formed but a small part of the staff of servants for the palace. It took something like 7,000 people to wait upon Abdul Aziz. His kitchens had 300 servants, and there were 100 porters who did nothing but carry burdens for the establishment. All of his numerous wives had their servants, hairdressers, and dressmakers, and the most favored had separate establishments with their own eunuchs, slaves, doctors, and cooks. At that time the buying and selling of women was secretly done, and the Sultan's establishment was often increased by girls from the Caucasus. Their value depended somewhat on their beauty and accomplishments, and the good singers and dancers brought the best prices. Then an ordinary slave girl of from 12 to 16 years of age sold for $200, and if very beautiful, she might bring as much as $2,000. Sometimes the Sultan paid even as much as $6,000. Today, the officials of the Republic say there is no longer any buying and selling of women in Turkey, but this is denied, and I am told it still goes on under the rose. One of the greatest influences for the advancement of women, not only in Turkey, but in Romania, Bulgaria, and other parts of the Near East, is the American College for Women, located on the Bosporus about 5 miles from the Golden Horn and within easy access of Constantinople. This institution was founded by Americans more than a generation ago and has been supported by generous gifts from many well-known people of the United States. Among these are Helen Gould, after whom Gould Hall, one of the fine buildings of the institution, is named. Another is Mrs. Russell Sage, who gave her name to Sage Hall. Gifts have also been received from John D. Rockefeller, Mrs. Henry Woods of Boston, Miss Grace Dodge, and others. The college was started at Scutari on the Asiatic side of the Bosporus, but it is now on the hills of Europe looking out upon Asia and commanding a view up and down the strait. Its campus has more than 100 acres of hill and hollow, and the walls under the great shade trees remind me of those at Oxford. The white stone buildings stand upon hills rising perhaps 1,000 feet from the Bosporus. The college has a central heating plant, is lighted by electricity, and its laboratories and other equipment are equal to the best in our own colleges. The science laboratory at Woods Hall is the most modern and complete in this part of the world, and the Bingham Medical Building has laboratories, research rooms, and an operating theater for medical students. The athletic ground of several acres has a hockey field, a running track, and a baseball court. Basketball, tennis, volleyball, and all sorts of games are played. The girls are fond of athletics, and for the most part they dress just like the girls of our colleges. On the athletic field they wear gymnasium suits, and I have photographs of these Mohammedan maidens making the 400-yard dash, jumping the hurdles, and performing all sorts of muscular feats. They do them well, too, even though the Prophet Muhammad, if he could see them, would roll over in his grave. The girls also have a college theater, and some of them actually wear men's clothes on the stage. The instruction compares favorably with that of Vassar, Smith, or Bryn Mawr. Many of the graduates become teachers and have for almost 40 years been spreading our civilization throughout the Near East. I have met graduates of this college in all the countries from Austria to the Black Sea. They speak English fluently and are invariably a great force for good. Those that marry usually get the best of the Turks for their husbands. The common language of the college is English, though at times there are about 20 nations represented among the students. There are Slavs, Greeks, Latins, Hebrews, Tartars, Arabs, Persians, Armenians, and Anglo-Saxons. Each nation of the Balkans has its own language, but in Turkey, and especially in Constantinople, people living on the same streets and even in the same apartment house do not speak the same tongue. At the Woman's College, each student studies as far as possible the language, literature, and history of her own nation, and this means that there are classes in Arabic, Turkish, Persian, Slavic, Greek, Italian, Latin, German, and French. The college not only gives a first-class university education along American lines, but has 2-year courses in commerce and agriculture, in home economics and normal training, and also in business. Many of the girls learn stenography in order to take positions as private secretaries. Their wages are only $25 or $30 a month at the start, but they are glad to earn the money. There is also a training school for nurses. Within the last year or so, the girls of the college have been studying citizenship and political science. The students are governing themselves, and they hold meetings conducted by parliamentary rules. They elect their own officers, much to the disgust of some of the students. Among the new arrivals of last year were some princesses from Russia and the Caucasus. One of these, a Georgian girl who had been accustomed to the homage of all about her, told one of the officers of the student government that she was a princess and not obliged to keep the rules. The officer replied, "We have no princesses here, and everybody must keep the rules." The girls follow the women's movement in other countries. They are watching woman suffrage as it has been developing in Romania and Bulgaria, and they would like to have it for Turkey. They have their own debating society where national affairs are freely discussed. Among the subjects of recent debates were the best form of government, free trade and protection, and the best profession for women. End of chapter 34.